Hey everyone, my name is Zach. I'm a 23-year-old competitive boulderer from Canada, currently living in Montreal. Welcome back to the COMPCLIMB training series, where I record most of my training, provide in-depth analysis of every session, and just chat about climbing with an emphasis on competition. So for today's episode, we are going to have a little bit of an atypical episode, and that is because usually a video will feature our normal 2 days in a row of training, but the way that my schedule is planned out leading up into this next North American Cup, I actually do 1 day on, 1 day off, and then 1 day on, 1 day off. So I basically do that twice instead of our normal 2 days on, 1 day off. And that's just because I don't like to have 2 days of rest before a competition. And so the way that my days just naturally laid out had me having 2 days of rest. So what I did instead was I took one of those days of rest and I basically moved it in between the 2 days of training, creating a 1 day on, 1 day off effect. And I do this instead of like adding a third day to eliminate the 2 day rest, because we're trying to stay really fresh and obviously maintain our peak as we're going into the North American Cup. And 3 days of climbing in a row would just be a bit too much, and I'd probably be feeling tired from that. So anyway, in this episode, our 1 day episode, we're going to be climbing at Bloc for both sessions. And the gym is pretty fresh. We're going to have lots of nice new boulders to try, with the exception of just a handful. There are some boulders I have gotten on in these sets, and that is because if you missed the last episode, I mentioned that I filmed a vlog with Loy, which will be coming out on his channel. I'm not sure when. Potentially it has already come out by now, but I'm not sure. But anyway, Loy and I had a fun session at Bloc, and I'll link his channel in the description, and you can go subscribe to him and keep an eye out for that vlog. But anyway, in that session I had with Loy, we were just kind of hanging out, having a nice chill session. And so basically we were sticking to moderates for the most part, which meant that for this session, I had like the hardest boulders left up in the gym to try. So I was excited to go tackle the hardest blocks up in Bloc for today. And here we are, starting off with one of the hard ones, as you can see. This one is a comp set, and this boulder is super epic. It's got some nice superhero style campus moves between these flat holds. This move out to the flat hold is very, very cool. You saw that I fell on my last try because you basically have to control the shoulder move and very, very slowly load your left arm and shift your weight across, because if you kind of just fall into the sloper, it's just too bad to really take a swing, like a crazy swing off. So it's like a really, really cool, subtle shift of your shoulder power on this move, and it makes for like a really fun boulder. And now you can see we're working this ending sequence. This boulder is definitely like quite hard, especially up at the end. The obvious sort of sequence, or at least what looks like the setter intended sequence, is to just have right hand on the right hold and then come into the left. But that was like really, really hard. And I end up finding some better beta later. But for now, what I am doing is a pretty important training tactic of mine that I do quite often. So basically, I was trying that red boulder a lot from the start, and I was getting pretty high on it for multiple attempts consecutively. And that was like really, really pumping me out. And I was getting to the point where I didn't want to rest for too long, because we want to try like a lot of the boulders in the gym. and I have like kind of a fast pace of my training sessions usually. And so I reached the point where basically the pump was accumulating too much to the point where I just was like really getting diminishing returns on that red boulder, and there was no progress to be made. So what I'm doing now is I'm intentionally looking, like I went and looked for a boulder with a crux that was either on the first move or the second move. So here we can see this purple boulder obviously has this really hard move for the start. And it's like the very first move is the crux, which is perfect for this situation. Because what this allows me to do is project a boulder and also de-pump at the same time. So by projecting this purple boulder, I am getting rid of my pump so I can go try red again later. And here you can see I'm finally re-sticking this first move. This boulder is like super, super epic. I think it was maybe supposed to be a campus paddle, but I found it was more my style to control the first, like control the second hold. But it was like quite hard to do it like that. And I was really satisfied to get a send of this boulder, especially since I never, like the first time I stuck that block crimped, the blocked crimp was on the send go because I just needed that extra bit of motivation. But yeah, by moving on from this red boulder and using the purple boulder to de-pump, because I was doing less consecutive moves on the purple boulder, obviously by just falling on the first move a bunch, what this allows me to do is basically obtain the maximum value possible from this session of bouldering. And this is something that I always keep in mind with my boulder sessions, is how can I obtain the maximum value? And what I mean by that is, like, if I was to just keep working this red boulder and failing on it, and then eventually reach the point of saying, okay, you know, I've tried this boulder a lot, my attempts are getting worse, the pump is just built up too much, I'm just going to forfeit on it, then I just wouldn't send this boulder, and then maybe I would even need to revisit it in a future session. But by calling it earlier than I normally would have on red and saying, okay, I'm going to go de-pump on another boulder, and then since I called it earlier on red than I normally would have, I still have gas in the tank to go retry it. And now what this allows me to do is go send purple and send red, instead of working red for too long and then just not sending it and then only sending purple. So I'm basically obtaining more value from the session by getting more sends, and also just, this is a tactic you can use to also just get more volume and more variety of movements into your system, and you know, just more different reps of different boulders under your belt. And I'd say that this is maybe an easy element, like an easy aspect of training to overlook. The aspect of getting the maximum value from your boulder sessions, because it's easy to sort of go into a boulder session with just the mindset of, okay, I want to just go try super hard on all of my projects and think that just trying hard means that it was a good session. But actually, there's a lot of tactics that can go into your bouldering sessions as well. And there's a lot of strategies that you can implement even just in regular training sessions, such as trying to get the maximum value, whether that means getting the most sends in possible or getting the most variety of boulders in possible. And another great way, or another great benefit of training your boulder sessions like this, like really trying to get the best value, is that it is actually extremely helpful if you're someone who finds yourself competing in scramble format bouldering competitions a lot. Because the whole point of a scramble format comp is to basically send as many boulders as possible in a limited amount of time. And that's exactly how I treat all of my regular boulder sessions pretty much, is I have an hour-long session and I try to get the most amount of variety and the most amount of sends in. And this actually prepares me quite well for scramble format comp rounds, which are usually the format of most bouldering competition qualifiers, at least on like a national level or on like the North American Cup level. So I would definitely recommend at least coming up with some ways and some strategies that you can get like the most amount of value from your boulder sessions, rather than simply just focusing on trying to try hard, if that makes sense. And I find that this is like a slight edge that I have in my training, is I try to think critically about, how can I maximize the way that this session of bouldering is going to turn me into a better climber, rather than just trying hard. So some food for thought, I guess. And then you can see we did our last workout on the program before the North American Cup coming up in Ottawa. And we just did a couple 1-rep maxes. I hit some pretty good target weights. Nothing too crazy. I especially don't want to push it too hard with these exercises because I don't want to injure myself either. So basically what I do is I try to hit like a comfortable 1-rep max for however I'm feeling on that session. And we were able to do 87 pounds with our dips, which is pretty good, and a 60-pound pistol squat. And so here we are doing our second session of the day at Bloc. And actually, the way that this day initially was going to be planned out was Maddie and I had planned to do our second session at Bloc because it was better for Maddie's on-sighting session, since she had already tried a lot of the boulders up in Bloc. But actually, she ended up tweaking her back a little bit in the morning session. Nothing too serious. I think she should probably be good to go by tomorrow, actually. But anyway, she decided to take the rest of this day off, which meant it was actually up to me now to decide where I wanted to climb. And the reason I actually decided to come back to Bloc instead of Bloc was for a reason that I don't actually think I've mentioned yet on the channel. And it's actually always at the forefront of my mind when I plan the location of all of my bouldering sessions. So the reason I came to Bloc was actually because I have less stuff to try in Bloc than I do at Bloc. So obviously that kind of sounds counterintuitive at first. Like, wouldn't I want to go to the gym with more boulders, like more new boulders available to me? And the reason that I wanted to have sort of less new boulders and a limited variety, a limited selection of boulders, is because this helps me not get out of control. So actually, when we first moved to Montreal, I was going too crazy with doing like 2 different gyms in one day. And what this does is it really makes me want to try every single boulder possible, and it would really mess my skin up. For those who remember our first few videos in Montreal, I was always complaining about pink tips, bloody tips, and just going to more gyms in a single day meant that I was just throwing myself at boulders uncontrollably. And it also meant that I wouldn't get a good amount of moderates under my belt. And oftentimes I would neglect slab as well, because I would just like be drawn to the power boulders or boulders that would also just mess my skin up in general. So by forcing myself to stay at one gym for a double session day of training means that, like for this session, I have to go try all the slabs that I didn't do and go try all the moderates that I didn't do. And ever since I've been extra conscious of doing this and sticking to one gym for a double day of training, it has been way better on my skin, and I don't overdo it anymore. And it's a way more sustainable way of training. So that's why I actually decided not to go to beta block, because if I went to beta block, chances are I'd try a bunch more crazy hard boulders and destroy my skin, which is especially bad right before comp. So for this session, we'll just be sticking to the nice moderates left up in the gym and the comfortable slabs. And speaking of epic slabs, this pink one is potentially my favorite boulder in the gym right now. This one was super fun and super well set. So you can see I'm retrying this boulder here, and it's because obviously I did like the foot first method to get the send to do this last move, but the move looks like it's meant to be a jump. So I wanted to retry it. And the jump method actually features quite a good tip of the day, I think. So for today's tip of the day, we're gonna talk about how you can optimize your setup for a lot of jumping moves in general, but especially coordination-based dynos. And today's tip of the day is gonna be the fact that often when we sort of wind up for a move like this, we tend to either swing our leg back and then immediately swing forward into a move, or sometimes the limb can be our arm or even just our torso. But the point is that usually when we will generate for a move like this, we'll immediately go from the setup into the launch and sort of have the idea that we need to carry our momentum through the whole way. And sometimes this is the case, but it isn't always. And this last move here is a good example of an instance where I'm actually going to wind up for the move. So obviously I bring my right leg back because I need to get the momentum for the moon kick. And I also really emphasize sinking deep into my lats so that I can pull well. And I pause in this position. I'm not even really swinging my leg back in this scenario. I'm actually sort of just placing it backwards. And there's actually not really any momentum. I'm just sticking my leg back, and then I'm only gonna use the forward momentum. Same sort of thing when I'm sinking into my lats. And so what this does is it gives me more time to focus on the actual move that I'm gonna execute. And in this case, it's a coordination move, so I really need to focus on exactly what my hands are doing. But if I was to just be in this position, sink back, put my leg back really fast, and then immediately go, I'm not giving my mind enough time to process what it's about to do because I'm going immediately from the setup into the launch. So today's tip of the day is going to be the fact that you should assess a lot of your jumping scenarios and decide whether you are actually able to sort of pause in this setup position with your leg back or arms sunk in or whatever, and give yourself that extra second of time to give your brain more time to coordinate its movements and gain more spatial awareness and help you basically execute the move you're going to do better instead of just going right into it off of the setup. So keep that in mind whenever you're doing your jumping moves. So here I am finally learning how to do this jump move, and it's super cool. It ends up being like a very cool come in with the left hand and foot stab on the wall to smear. And all of these elements are very key for sticking that last move. And so, yeah, I'm glad that I repeated that boulder to force the jump method rather than just doing the foot first, especially because if the finish hold was just slightly different, you wouldn't be able to do the foot first. And it was good to practice the jump move. And now let's check out this boulder. This purple V8 was like deceptively like an epic boulder. So obviously I could tell it was like just a good looking boulder, but check out this foot sequence here. Like there's this really cool walking of the foot sequence that is really well forced on the ending of this boulder. And it's like tempting to kind of just want to stick your right foot all the way out to the foot chip. But the setter did a really good job of making you walk your feet all the way across and trusting your smear. So that, yeah, this boulder was really well set and is like a hidden gem, and also probably one of the best boulders in the gym. And actually, now that I think about it, I like, you know, from gym to gym, you'll have like maybe one style that's pronounced every now and then, or like that will stick out to you. For example, like my family gym back in Ontario, we went through a couple years where we would always set hard stand-up moves into underclings. And you just gotta like, creep up into an undercling. A move that I've been noticing at Bloc from time to time are these sort of walking of the feet across volumes to get to a foot chip. And I think it's like a really cool sequence to have be common in your gym. So I always like when I see a Bloc boulder with a foot walk sequence, basically. They're always fun and they're always well set, and they always add like a nice level of complexity to a boulder. So yeah, shout out to the foot walk sequences up at Bloc. And anyway, that wraps up the day of training with this boulder here. And also check out these beautiful, beautiful shoes that I've been waiting for a bit and have finally shipped to my place. And so yeah, these are the flagship Pros by Unparallel. And basically what I'll do is I'll start testing these things out as soon as possible after the North American Cup in Ottawa. So obviously I want to stick to my Tomoe Narasakis because I'm very comfortable with them and they feel like my comp shoe. But as soon as the comp is over, we'll definitely start testing out these flagships. So anyway, that's the end of the episode. Hope you enjoyed. I think in the next one, we will be finally getting to beta block. So yeah, look forward to that. Insert catchy video outro here.